Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Really?
You know
You
it.
really? Did you get the memo again?
You know it.
Hey guys, this is completely not coordinated. I promise we didn't talk about this before we got on today.
This is my wife Allison was like, "Yo, you should wear this shirt. Like this is real cool. This would look good on camera." So
Hello, here we are. You can't make these things up. I promise I won't act like how I used to have a boyfriend in college who called me every night before class to ask what I was wearing tomorrow. And I promise you guys we didn't do this.
it's cool if you ever look at any of those like early 80s hip hop photos, from like there's that book Back in the Day, I think Jamil Shabazz, and it's cool because back then a lot of couples, we're not a couple obviously, but a lot of couples would wear like matching stuff down the street. It looked so awesome. They would have the same Lee jeans, the same Adidas, like it was real cool.
Yeah, I love coordination, but I think my irritation back then was I was trying to dump him. and
Sure,
I
yeah.
didn't know and I didn't know how. I was like, just so I always think it's interesting. I actually pay attention to things like this a lot because sometimes when I go and work out at the gym, I notice that for that day there's a lot of synchronicities in the colors that people are picking. And I always find it fascinating that, like, if I show up and everybody's got on red or everybody's got on blue, or it's so, it's, I'm not surprised by it, but I'm still tickled by it.
Yeah, my wife and I wear a lot of animal print, so often on some days we'll be like just full on together, just full on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like, this was like the last, I was like, you know what? I can't think about this right now. Let me just throw this. And that was clearly the right choice.
It's cool. Maybe we're getting like it's like a delayed Leo season.
Well, honestly, as a Leo rising and a Lilith in Leo, every day is Leo season for me.
Yeah. Well, as a Venus in Leo, I could understand as well. All right, how we doing, T? What's going on?
Oh man, I think this is such a great topic. For those of you who are there was a few people asking, who is this? Who's this guy? And this is Eliott. Eliott and I have decided to do a series of lives called Fire Fridays. And last week we did the topic of, just parental issues, mommy and daddy issues. And so you guys can go back and check out last week's Fire Friday that we did. It was great. And so now we're leaning into how to kill your inner people pleaser. So Eliott is someone like myself immersed in the work. He is predominant in men's work, and I tend to, work with a lot of women. And so we've decided to collaborate together and bring a space together where, because I think this is where a lot of this is headed. Like, we have to start having spaces where it's safe enough for men and women, just people in general, to have conversations. And I think this is the next step of the healing, is where we have safe space for community leaders, men and women, to converse about these things. And eventually we're bringing other people into the conversation and into the space too, so we can reach a new level of collaboration. Because personally, I don't know about you, I've never been a leader in women's work who's about the battle of the sexes. I am for unity and harmony amongst them. So, I think this is a great place to start as I continue to move into that space, and I'm sure for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that you and I always talk about is how do we take this healing work outside of just like the one-on-one context and kind of reframe it and zhuzh it up to make it more approachable to more people. I think that for a lot of us on this journey, it can just feel so interior and so like it's me and my mind, or it's like me and my coach. And I think that what we're experimenting with in this space is just finding ways to, again, without the judgments and sort of like cancellations and just all the stuff that's happening in the broader culture, bring a little honesty and a little dialogue to things that I think people want to hear about and want to talk about and want to be like oh, cool, it's not just me. And like, I can mess up here. I could like say the wrong thing. I could say something that might be unpopular because I think out there, the climate is just so, you know, I don't mean to make light of this in terms of what's going on in the world, but like it's very warlike. And so I think what we're trying to do here is just craft out, little peace peace zones to talk about some of this stuff.
Yes. So look, there goes my throat chakra already. So let's get into this, this people pleasing topic.
Yeah.
I think firstly, we're not getting into astrology too much, but you as a Libra and me, honey, as a Libra moon, like,
Oh yeah.
I think this is a great conversation too, because like as a Libra moon, I find myself to be very diplomatic. I find myself to be very fair, very empathetic. And I think where this goes into this topic a lot is that I saw this quote the other day too, where it's like, when you're so empathetic and you're so fair and you're so diplomatic, that you give so much space even to people who are doing you wrong, who have unjust behavior, because you are at that place of objectivity where you can, remove yourself from your feelings and also see the spiritual qualities and the human qualities of people. So I think both you and I are great people to talk about this with our own personal placements, with our own personal life, especially the work that we do. So I'm going to let you start where you want to start, and then I'll flow in with you.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I want to put a pin in this because I think that this is something really interesting because, maybe some of your fans see you as this very fiery, like no fucks given, kind of like, I'm going to tell you like it is type of person. So I think it's really interesting actually to hear that you have, maybe I'm throwing this back at you, but like that you have people pleasing tendencies, because I think the trap witch that a lot of us have known and kind of followed over the years, it's like, I think of you of someone that's like not taking any bull, like, like, fuck you if you don't like it, like, so I guess I'm curious for you, like, how did that people pleasing kind of show up, and like what have you done to work on it?
So I think that one of the things that flooded my memory actually earlier today when I was just meditating on coming into this talk is that as a young kid, my energy was very much not people pleasing. So I was not a combative kid, but I was an aware kid. So I had a very strong voice that was, conditioned to be quiet. And I was very aware of when people were disrespecting me. At a very young age, I was kind of no bullshit. And I could call, even adults out being like, yeah, I don't like you talking to me that way. But like many of us, I think that we go through these phases, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but as growing up in the Caribbean, I heard many times children should be seen and not heard.
Oh yeah.
Children should be seen and not heard. And yeah, there's an element of truth to that, of teaching children how to mind their space when maybe there's a more adult conversation. That's just a general boundary thing, yes. But I think when there's truth and there's real presence to how a kid is showing up, and really doing this from a very intuitive place, I think that, at least for me, I got that shut down. So I went through very much a lot of time in my life where I was very introverted. I was very shut down. I didn't participate in things, and I became very passive, and I became very avoidant. So although I had, desire for connections or whatever, a lot of that conditioning to shut myself down made me this like really miserable introverted person that did not like people, that did not want to have to deal with them on any type of level, which, is unrealistic. And I hear this a lot from people. It's like, oh, I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to. I'm just like, good luck trying to live on Earth. Good luck trying to live on Earth, because the reality of it is that a lot of us are here for transpersonal purpose. And what does that mean? We are here to interact with the collective and our fellow man. And yes, it is quite a reality that you could go and you could live off the grid and you could live isolated away from people. But I mean, when we really look at the reality of that, how many people could really deal with that for the rest of their lives? Not many people. Not many people. There's going to be a desire for fun, joy, you know, just even just that interaction, communication, feeling. So to me, that's very unrealistic. And so honestly, I think where people pleasing, for me, a lot of people don't realize that my whole brand was birthed on trying to create a stronger sense of self for this good girl that I had in me. So although I was introverted and I was, you know, kind of cutting myself away from human interaction, I'm still a very loving person, very affectionate person, very understanding person, and I had a desire for deep connection. But often I didn't have good boundaries for myself, and I didn't have good boundaries with others. So in 2016, I remember, and I've told this story many times, I remember watching this movie about Griselda Blanco. And for those of you who aren't familiar, she's the godmother of cocaine. She's like the woman, the best woman to have ever done it in the drug game. And what I recognized really quickly about her was she was an Aquarius. And I'm like, oh, I'm an Aquarius too. And her story was about going from a very, you know, innocent child who was around a lot of bullshit. And then eventually, you know, her family, her lovers, all of them were very either unkind to her or unfair to her. So she had to build this very strong persona in order to protect herself. You know, so I think when we talk about people building their ego, going super hard into their masculinity, a lot of people have had to do that out of a place of survival because they have all of these great aspects and qualities in them, but it becomes hard to distribute those to the right people and in the right spaces. And so I remember really getting into her story, and I'm like, oh, she's an Aquarius, you know, like me. And but like, we're not like that. Like, we're just not cutthroat, and we're not, you know, aggressive like that for the most part. Most Aquariuses I meet are not. And so I developed this alter ego called T Blanco. And I said that she was going to help me, you know, start channeling some of this more no bullshit, assertive qualities of myself that I felt like I needed to channel in order to get to a place where, although I was very much interested in interacting with people, not letting people get the best of the good girl. So, you know, I think for me, where I realized where people pleasing was getting to me is because I became very passive aggressive. And at times I think these are the qualities I still struggle with, if I'm honest, where you're still trying to be so nice, so kind, so giving,
Yeah.
stretching yourself, and then you start becoming this like this aggressiveness, and it comes out in your communication, it comes out in your body language. And so I really started recognizing that I had to put a stop to mainly just stretching myself thin out of my empathy, my fairness, and diplomacy, when it was really causing me to become angry.
Mm,
And I think too, I for most people who, you know, see this, you know, persona and this embodiment that I've come into, I've always been someone who does not really like conflict. You know, I feel like I'm built for conflict, but I think a huge part of my incarnation is learning how to deal with conflict more logically as opposed to emotionally.
mm,
And I think for people, you know, at least for me, I found myself getting to a point of explosiveness. So when we are, you know, trying to stuff ourselves down, we're trying to be so fair, we're trying to be so kind, so empathetic, so fair to other people without having boundaries for ourselves, we get explosive, you know? And
mm.
I think a lot of people, also myself, if you don't like conflict, when you're dealing with people who you know are reactive, of course you want to avoid the conflict. So you're gonna stuff yourself down. You're gonna want tiptoe around. You're gonna walk on eggshells because firstly, you don't want to deal with the reactiveness. You don't want to deal with the drama. And then you don't want to have to just go off on the motherfucker.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the thing, you know. I think a lot of times when people see people who are super kind, super empathetic, they just assume that that's just their basic nature. When I think, no, a lot of us are those qualities, and the emotional regulation and the centeredness that you find are people really trying to deal with those very fiery parts of themselves that they don't have to lash out and they don't have to go to these extremes. Because I tell people all the time, people say, oh, you're so centered, you're so, I'm really fucking crazy. And you know, so there's an aspect of how do you balance that extreme fire within yourself while still interacting with people without also going to a place where you stuff yourself down, and that can be tricky.
Yeah.
That could be tricky.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the relationship between like the fire and the water, you know, how like sometimes when those things interact, it can be a really crazy kind of mixture, right? Because when you have the fire, the aggression, the water of the emotions, it's like, whew, you know. And I was around a lot of those kind of environments as a kid. My parents are both cancer, so it's like, you know, not so much between my mom and my dad, but like definitely like my grandmother and my mom and like my grandparents would have like very like exaggerated like screaming matches like in front of me when I was like 5, you know, my aunt too. And like when everyone would get together, there's just a lot of like feminine, like aggressive energy around me. And so I think that probably is where some of my people pleasing came from, is like not really wanting to like be in the scrum, you know, like not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Not to mention, you know, Gemini rising, Libra sun, right? Cancer moon. So I'm hella like emotional. Let's see it both ways. let's de-escalate, you know, let's de-escalate. I think also, you know, with the people pleasing, I don't really have that same experience as you of like suppressing the anger. That's actually been more of my process in the past probably 10 years doing men's work, you know, because I was always really afraid to be seen as being angry, you know. I felt like that was like a bad man quality, and I always wanted to be, you know, funny and stylish and like genteel and stuff, you know. So it's interesting, it's like we're both coming at it from different sides of the escalator. Like you're kind of bringing the anger down and I'm trying to bring it up, you know. Like I have a couple times a week now where to kind of cope with some of that people pleasing, I have to go in a room and just beat the shit out of a pillow and scream and hit stuff and throw things around, you know. What's it called? Like a rec room? Mm-hmm. Like those places where you go to like smash printers and stuff. Yeah. Trying to just like take a beat here and figure out what wants to come through about this people pleasing.
Well, you know, one of the things that you said about, you know, not wanting to be in the scrum, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
think, you know, the thing is that that's really energetically draining for a lot of us, right? Is like we don't want to be in this drama, we don't want to be in this escalation, we don't want to be in any of that. But then there's this sense of tiptoeing around being direct or putting yourself into it, which then later can still end up draining you.
Oh, yes. And like I feel like, again, I work with a lot of guys. I call them recovering nice guys, mm-hmm. right? Because like on the surface, they don't want to be angry. They don't want to disappoint anybody. They don't want to be the guy that's like, I don't want Chinese food. Let's get Mexican, right? Mm-hmm. And over time, I feel like when you're locked in those behavioral patterns, that resentment, like you were saying, that resentment just drains you of so much energy because mm-hmm. it's like pulling down your life force. Right? As we know from our own experiences, when you want to be a certain way and you have to put on a mask to not be that way, that places like a real kind of tug of war on your chi, you know? And so it's like we think that we're doing the good thing, right? Because we're like quiet Tatiana, like I'm good, I'm the good girl, I'm being quiet, right? And I'm like agreeable, nice guy, sensitive, artistic man, right? But like over time, I feel like we get angry and resentful as fuck because we're actually suppressing our desire to be direct, right?
Absolutely.
Because when we're direct, we have freedom, right? Because you either can know where we stand and you can, right? Or like you can go somewhere else.
And you know, it's interesting. You know, I felt called to pull up the definition of resentment, and it says bitter indignation at having been treated unfairly. You know, and that's the thing. When you are a people pleaser, you will tolerate. You will tolerate a lot of disrespect. You will
Oh,
tolerate a lot of being treated unfairly. You will tolerate for the sake of keeping the peace because you don't want to disturb it.
yeah.
Right? But then we go into, is it really peace when you're not at peace? It's a false sense of security and it's a false sense of peace.
Oh,
And, you know, there's this quote that says, you know, you can really tell a lot about somebody, how they act and how they treat you when they don't get what they want from you.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of us have a hard time speaking up for their desires, the treatment that they want, the things that they're not tolerating, because they a lot of people have a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. They fear being the bad guy, the bad girl. They fear their reputation being tainted, how someone is going to paint them, someone's narrative becomes of them. And that's why it's really, really important to have a strong sense of self, to be able to check in with yourself. And so if you're someone who struggles with a distorted view of yourself, either through, you know, low self-esteem, conditioning, or you trust other people more than you trust yourself, of course you're going to run with it and you're going to take on everybody's narrative, you're going to take on everybody's story, you're going to allow everybody's chords to go into you, and then you're going to allow them to play the puppet master with you, and you're just going to be like fucking Pinocchio. I just want to be a real boy. And you're going to be the fake fucking version of yourself because you allow people to cord you and manipulate you and pull you in every direction that they desire to see you go in. And I think too, that's why when it comes to I want to say bring in the word negotiation, right? Because in life, if you don't learn how to be a negotiator, you're going to struggle. And a part of knowing how to negotiate too and dealing with people is trusting your own flow, trusting your own intuition. You know, when we talk about knowing when to keep the peace, I don't want to necessarily say keep the peace. I want to say knowing when to compromise. And a lot of people, you know, I don't know if you ever saw this video of Eartha Kitt. She's like, compromise for what? And I think it's a great video, but in recent years, I've noticed how there's a truth to it, but there's also another side that has to be tapped into. Yes, there are certain things in life for you that should be non-negotiables, right? That you're not willing to compromise on. But the truth of the matter is, in high priority relationships, there are going to be times where there's a level of compromise. And so when it comes to people pleasing, there's a great terminology that I learned about 2 years ago called conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And they use this a lot in the workplace. So in conflict resolution, we are weighing things based on low priority relationships and high priority relationships. And so they give you this structure of there's a section that's about being passive and accommodating. There's a side that becomes combative and competitive. And then there's a sweet spot in the middle that's compromising and collaborative. And in healthy, high priority relationships, the objective should always be collaboration. And then sometimes there's going to be a sense of compromise. Like
Mm-hmm.
what you said. Okay, say Allison wants to eat Mexican today and you want to eat seafood. And you're like, damn, you know, Allison, I really want seafood today, but this spot that you're saying Mexican, man, hey, maybe they got a shrimp dish there that, and then you end up going and you guys agree on that, and then she says, you know what, Eliott, next time we'll go to just a solid seafood. That's healthy compromising.
Yes, yes. And, just to kind of put another layer on that, I love what you were saying about, like, you have to know, way back you just said, like, you got to know who you are, because I think that when you don't know who you are, it's hard to just have a point of departure for your compromise, right? Like when you have no knowledge of self or no knowledge of what you actually desire, it makes it easy to people please and just have people walk all over you all the time, because there's, in politics, they call that a power vacuum, right? It's like nobody's in charge. And so whoever just comes in is like, all right, I'm like the king now or whatever, The other thing that kind of got me thinking is, you settle for a lot of bullshit when you're afraid of being abandoned. And I think that energy kind of plays in a lot to people pleasing, where we're so afraid. If I'm direct with you and I say, you know what, like, I just can't work with you for that amount of money, we're so afraid that everyone's going to leave and then we're going to be on our own, right? But then again, when you kind of dig a little deeper, it's like, there's nothing wrong with being on your own if you're in your knowledge and you're in your integrity, right? So it's like, there's this energy here of like not knowing yourself and like really kind of being afraid to be with yourself. Again, goes back to the relationship thing. That's why a lot of people are in shitty relationships. They don't know how to compromise. And ultimately, they're so afraid of being by themselves that they'll just allow themselves to be steamrolled and to be kind of erased, because they don't want to face like, well, who am I when I'm just like in my truth? Who am I when I don't have anyone else to please but me?
I think even with what you're saying, going back to the FOMO thing, like a lot of times people are afraid of abandonment. They're afraid of missing an opportunity. They're afraid of these things because first of all, if you're not, like you said, connected to your sense of self and knowing what your desires are, and if you're not connected to your intuition, you will take anything that's handed to you. You will take any opportunity. You will take any relationship. You will take any amount, because that's also coming from a place of desperation, fear of missing out. Oh, this is my only opportunity. Oh, and like, again, afraid of those seasons where you say no in order to receive more later on, being by yourself, being strong in your sovereignty. And, this boils down to a lot of codependence. Like people have a lot of codependence on their sense of worth. They weigh what they are worth based on what is handed to them, the sole opportunities that they see in the moment, because they can't see opportunities beyond that moment. And again, I want to bring in how, like, negotiation, like learning to be a negotiator. At the end of the day, I remember there was I used to go to a sweat lodge here in Atlanta, and there was an attunement that the Baba used to have us do when we were in the sweat lodge. And he'd always say, nobody can say yes for you besides yourself. Nobody can say no for you besides yourself. So you need to get used to saying yes, and you need to get used to saying no. So he would have us say yes from deep from in our belly and like really project it, and then he would have us do the same thing when it came to saying no. And when we look at the definition of negotiation, it says a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement. And a lot of people pleasers will have the discussion or avoid the discussion, but not getting to the agreement that feels good for them, and an agreement that feels reciprocal. So many people, let's get into this. A lot of people pleasers, somebody just fell off my show. See, look, the spirits over there are like, yeah. I don't even know what that was. The throat. So we're going to get into the throat chakra. And although, many people know this already, but I'm going to bring it up too. Most people don't realize that there's a big correlation in synchronicity to the throat and the yoni. Your throat, inside of it, actually looks like the inside of a yoni as well, because this is life-giving. Your throat is life-giving. It is birthing. every time you speak, you're giving birth to something. That's why the way you speak over your life, the way that you speak into your relationships, the way you speak into your negotiations, these become your agreements. And then these become your contracts that you're giving birth to. So a lot of times when people are saying, oh my God, I feel like nothing that I want is manifested, you have to look at where your contracts are. You have to look where what you're negotiating with. And so if you're someone who's really passive around negotiating and putting your foot down, putting your boundaries and speaking up for yourself, you're going to always end up with the shitty end of the stick. You're always going to end up with less. You're always, it goes back to closed mouths don't get fed. And it's so much deeper than just what that phrase appears like on the surface. I remember there's times where, I literally would go to a restaurant and my food would either be shitty, it would be wrong, and I wouldn't say shit. And I would sit there and I would eat it. And going to that example, how many people get things put in front of them that's not their only option, but yet they sit there and they fucking eat it because they are afraid to open their mouth and command in, you politely too, what they want. I remember I used to be so passive about that. Just yesterday I ordered Uber Eats and that was shit that they sent me. They sent me shit. And I, complained and they give me my refund. And I remember recently a lot of quality was going down with a lot of the places I was ordering from. And at some point, Uber Eats was like, we've administered you too many refunds recently. We might have to flag your account. And I had to message them and I said, like, what does the quality of their food have to do with my complaint? As long as I am paying for this service, I deserve to get what I want. Now, okay, my friend Angela Gallo was talking about this week. This becomes slippery, and I think this goes into the work that we do. Yes, at times when people pay for things, they expect what they want, but there still has to be a level of respect. I'm not going to say to the restaurants, oh, I'm not going to go off in a way that's disrespectful, but I'm just going to hold their quality accountable to what they say that they're presenting. That's just basic, the basic common decency.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing is again, compromise. How can we be in our truth of what we expect, receive what we believe that we're owed, while keeping other people accountable, but not kind of crossing over into the resentment and the war and going crazy, right? Similar example. So yesterday, my wife and I are moving into this space for a couple days. Elevators broke. Okay, we got 10 things, and a lot of them are heavy. And I was just I was so mad. Obviously, I just took it so personally that the elevator's fucking broken, and I had to walk damn near probably was 4 city blocks with all these things, right? And my instinct was oh man, these people about to hear from me, they're gonna, right? And then turns out someone comes and they're oh, are you having a problem? Yeah, I'm having, blah, blah, blah. Oh, let me get you a thing to help carry this, right? Let me walk with you and get some of these, get some of these bags out of your way. And I actually wound up feeling kind of happy that people could meet me in my vulnerability rather than going to war,
Yeah.
But I'm hearing a similar thing in what you're talking about, which is basically when we have a boundary or a level that we need met, what do we do when people fall short? We can come out of shadow and say, oh, it's nothing, right? I'll carry all these bags myself. Don't worry about it. I will eat that. What'd you order that was shitty?
Oh, I ordered some jerk pork, and majority of it, huh?
Yeah, no, okay, yeah. So
some jerk pork.
Yeah. What, dry or just not good?
Literally, it was all fat and no meat.
Oh,
so they served me a plate that they charged $18 for.
Woo!
And all they wanted to do was think that, You see, this is and you see this is where quality comes in. I'm West Indian. I'm from the Caribbean. I know what Caribbean food is supposed to be. They served me some fat with barbecue sauce, with no jerk sauce. And I just wanted to type them and be like, look, just because you came to America and a lot of these American people don't know what quality Jamaican food is, I'm gonna need you to do better. But you see, that's what happens. They pass a lot of quality because a lot of people aren't aware or don't know.
Yeah. Again, goes back to what we were saying. When you don't have the knowledge of self, when you don't know what it's supposed to be, it's very hard to figure out if you're getting your needs met or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think what was interesting you just brought up a moment ago before that was, it's picking your battles. Like yesterday, I found my shadow side. Creeping. Actually, if I'm just honest, like the past couple weeks, my shadow has been like, "Hey, bitch, what's up? We want to play."
Me too.
Yeah, like on overtime. Like let's get in the game. And so, even yesterday, I had to catch myself because I was at the gym, and I'm very respectful of people's space. I'm always courteous. Like I'm always thinking about other people too. So I had set up a little nice space on the ground that was, far enough for many things that I wouldn't get in people's way. And so I would have my own personal space. And this trainer came and put her client literally like right beside me. And in my head, I was like, you wasn't going to ask me to move, or you just wasn't going to be courteous. And like, I felt myself being Christopher fucking Columbus out of my space. And I really hate that energy, that real, like I call that real fucking colonizer energy, where you just gonna come up in my shit and try to bulldoze me out of this space without having any courtesy. And I found myself flaring up to really like take off my headphones and be like, so if I didn't move, you was just gonna start her on top of me?
Yeah.
And a part of me just knew that was gonna start some drama. And I said, you know what? In this moment, it's not worth my energy. I'm just going to move a few steps over so I don't have to come up out my neck. And I think that, a lot of times people look at spiritual people and they're like, oh, they're so calm, they're so centered. And when we talk about like really integrating the work, like we talk about visualizing being, in our esteem. We visualize, we're manifesting the stronger sense of self, but we don't realize when we really have to put it into practice, because there's a part of me in that moment that could be like, she's taking up your territory. But then I'm just like, is this really a battle that I need to break out into full warrior mode about? Mm-hmm. No, is she being a little ignorant? Yes, but do I really need to tell herself about it? No. I was about to put a complaint in, and that's what I used to do a lot of times. The old me, who was really trying to keep the peace and keep the anger down, used to go file a complaint so that if I went off, people would already have in the complaint box that I had spoke on this before. Because also too, I never used to be more tactful about my communication. And I think for a lot of people, they can relate to this. When you've stuffed it down for so long, that's when that shit starts to come out even more. And
so much crazier. Like I think that's the thing, right? Is that like, I love that you brought that up. Like that continued suppression, it comes out like crazy, right? Anyone that's ever had roommates knows this, right? When it's like day goes by, okay, like they put their dirty dishes in the sink, right? Happens again. You don't say anything. You don't want to confront them. You don't want to rock the boat. Maybe it was their apartment first and you're afraid of getting kicked out because you don't write all the reasons, right? And then one day the same dishes are there and you're just like, like throwing like crazy street fighter fireballs at them. And it's not because like the dish, it's like the unsaid things that you're mad at yourself for and you're mad at them for become fucking eruptive.
Yeah. And I feel to, put this in here because this is something that I'm aware of in my journey. A few weeks ago, this was actually a message I posted on my page where, I think a lot of people who have either stuffed it down for a long time and are starting to feel their sense of self can relate to this, or people just in general who have gotten to the point where they're not taking no shit from nobody, so they're constantly popping off. What I said, like, we have to be mindful of this pop off energy, because one of the things that I've recognized in Santeria and getting readings and stuff, like, for some of us that could be really tragic. You know, for those of you not familiar in Santeria, when we do our readings, we measure numbers a lot of times in heat versus coolness. And so some of us are very heated in our nature. I myself am heated in my nature. I know other people who are heated in their nature. And so sometimes the resolution for certain things is not going to be popping off. And sometimes that's going to make you feel weak. You would be like, nah, man, I'm not going to be no punk. I ain't going to be no bitch ass motherfucker. I'm going to let them. But that can be detrimental and tragic for a lot of people. You know, I've been told many times, like, really watch yourself, because that can turn tragic for you. And, you know, there's times I've been, you know, I'm going to just be transparent. I've been walking out of Target and I'm walking in the street, you know, the pedestrian walk, and here comes a car, clearly not wanting to wait for me. And I find myself getting enraged and wanting to pop off and hit the trunk or what the fuck is, and those types of scenarios. I live in Atlanta. People are getting shot in movie theaters now because they're fighting over seats, you know, and I think about stuff like that. There can be a moment where someone's like, I'm not letting myself be a people pleaser no more. I'm finna pop off. But you have to be so mindful of even standing up for yourself, because depending on the level of heat that other person has too, that's where standing up and going too far could go in the wrong direction.
Right. Well, that's that unhealed masculine.
Yes.
Right? That's that aggressive, I need to win, and me winning means you losing, right? Or we can't both win. You know, I work with people a lot on this, because it's like, eventually, it's funny, right? It's like, I think eventually years of people pleaser makes you into a pop-off.
Right? Absolutely. So many people are like that. So many people don't realize where their aggressiveness comes from is a lot of resentment, anger, buildup, suppression. And so you go to the opposite end of the spectrum.
I mean, I've seen this in my mom a lot, you know, like,
mine too.
Right. Because it's like, my mom's like a real, like, do everything for everyone else person, right? Like, takes care of her sick sister, goes to Target to buy the sick sister the thing so that she can wear in rehab, blah, 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 blah. All good, smiles. Yeah, I'm doing this. I don't mind. And then one day, like, hellfire, just crazy hellfire. So I think, again, you know, this to me, what I'm hearing in a lot of these people pleasing scenarios is, like, again, focusing in on knowledge of self and kind of doing the work on our own in our own labs, because when you go out into the outside world, it's going to be unpredictable, right? I coach a lot of my clients in this that are going through, like, career changes. You know, they're people pleasers at work. And so, can you do that project? Yeah, I'll do that project. Can you do it tomorrow? Yeah. Oh, I'll stay late. Cool. Like, I'm keto. Oh, don't worry. Just order me Thai food. I'll pick around the noodles, right? And it's like over and over again until one day they just want to go crazy, you know? And I'm like, you need to, like, slow the game down and see what you can work on your own, because going out into the world is always going to be a different experience. And I feel like we need both of those to get strong, right? To use your great metaphor, we need to be in the gym, got to build the muscle, but we also need to go on our diplomatic missions to other people so that we can test out these things in new environments and give ourselves an opportunity to get better at it. You know, I think that's the other thing, is that so many of us people pleasers, we sort of fuck ourselves because we're so afraid of that abandonment. We're so afraid that someone's not going to like us that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to see what it, 11:44, by the way, on my clock. We don't give ourselves the opportunity to bob and weave and plant our flag, but also integrate the other person's energy. It's like we're so afraid of things not going well that we're really never able to like workshop it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, in at the end of the year last year, I did a workshop on social anxiety,
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
And a lot of people have social anxiety because not only are they afraid of people, they're afraid of themselves. We're afraid we don't feel safe in ourselves. We don't feel safe amongst other people. At the end of the day, you know, Earth is going to be our home for a minute.
Yeah.
Within our vessel, this is going to be our home. So we have to, at some point, if we're going to meet our joy, our happiness, our destiny, we're going to have to get less scared of people. We're going to have to get less scared of ourselves. And, at the end of the day, anxiety is normal.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is normal. A lot of times, I think when we're starting to come out of our comfort zones, we're starting to reach our upper limits. We will go into that, that flight mode, like, oh no, let me just avoid this, or let me. And I tell people all the time, you could be avoidant all you want, and this is where I've learned my lessons a lot of times. Like, I was avoidant, I was passive, and somehow drama and conflict and things that were making me stand up for myself, oh, my voice, become confrontational a little bit, kept meeting me. And I tell people, like, you could literally hide out in your house all day. Don't think that something's not going to catch you at your house, because that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. And so,
Well,
again, going back to the people pleasing and negotiation, like, a lot of times with that social anxiety, people are afraid to collaborate with people, to have, to fight for their agreements, to really put their stuff on the table. And this is something I coach a lot of women about when going into relationships. A lot of women sometimes get into situationships with men. They're like, I just don't understand how I got here. I want to be a girlfriend. I want to be a wife. It's like, what was your contract? What was your agreement? Did you just go into it over nurturing, giving it all that you got? Of course,
right.
he was probably going to milk the cow dry if he was just giving away the whole cow. You had no agreement. You didn't negotiate anything. And a lot of times, again, they don't want to negotiate, like you said, because they're afraid of abandonment. Oh, well, I'll just deal with the little that I can get, the little crumbs that I can get, because you know what? It's okay that he doesn't give me the whole loaf. It's just okay. I can't do better than him. There's nothing else. He's the best that I can get. And having that mentality is a very strong aspect of people pleasing.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, we talk about this a lot. Like, when you stop accepting those crumbs, right? You might go from being the hero to the villain real quick. Again, as a soldier of the entertainment business, I was around a lot of narcissists, right? And those people, of course, they thrive off of you having low standards, so that you can just keep giving and nurturing and telling them that they're the greatest and you're so fun, right? And then when you're like, hey, I need something back and I'm not getting it, they're like, what do you mean, dude? Like, fucking, what do you mean you need something back, or I'm not doing this for you? How dare you say that, right? And that's that same energy of like giving away the whole cow, Again, that's why I think with this people pleasing stuff, it's like, I think it pays to be very disciplined about your intentionality and the outcome that you are trying to work towards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because again, when there's a power vacuum, you don't know. It's just like anything in life. When you have no goal, when you have nothing that you're aiming towards, it's easy to just get stepped on, right? Just like anything. When you have no strategy, what do you expect?
Intentions. What's interesting? I want to share a part of my own personal reading that I had on Monday. I had a reading with this lady on Monday based on my cards of life. I'm a 5 of spades, and she dropped me a good gem, and I've been sharing it with people because I think this goes beyond myself. She said to me, you need to put people into 3 categories.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure out if they're communication, if they're emotional support, or if they're resources.
Ooh.
And this is not beyond something that I have already started looking at myself. Do you remember Meet the Parents?
Yeah.
You remember when De Niro's talk about like the circle of trust?
Yeah.
I've already, started sharing this kind of concept with my clients too, where it's like, you can have your people who are your like core people, your high priority
Oh,
relationships. Then you have your acquaintances, your comrades, your associates. And then you have, maybe the general population, the public or whatever have you. And again, this goes back to even how conflict resolution is really important when understanding people's places in your life. But depending on how much energy you give to something and how much you owe it. You know what I mean? Like,
I love,
how
yeah.
much you could be more intentional. There's times where, like, I'll even give you an example. This week I had I had somebody who I must have blocked. I blocked so many people. I don't know. Protect your energy. And the person came back from another page and they were like, oh, why'd you block me? You didn't know I have a backup page? And then proceeds to like tell me how they really feel about me. This is why nobody really likes you or trusts you in the community. And I was like, finding myself about to be like, and I was like, I don't fucking know you. I don't know you. And I'm so glad you came back to tell me how you really feel, because this space ain't for you. So
Yeah.
my intentions are that
Oh,
I don't owe you shit. A conversation, an explanation. I'm blocked that page too.
Tia,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
and to me, really and truly, it's like the old me would be like, oh no, let me explain. Let me see if I did block. No, you've told me how you felt. So my intentions are not to correct you. In the past, I've been someone who would want to correct. What do you mean? What, and over explaining yourself. Oh
Oh,
my God, talk about a people pleasing test. Over explaining yourself, being empathetic, even being empathetic to people who are being shitty to you. For what?
yeah. Oh, all right. I got two things. So I'm gonna hit them while they're fresh. One,
Yes.
I love that you talked about the characterization, because I was writing on this yesterday, how like because of the way communication works, which is basically insane, because historically we have never meant to have this much access to other people and to us and vice versa. So I just love, like, people get so fucked up on the internet because they confuse random Joe Jerkoff with an opinion with like someone who's been with them for 10 years.
Mm.
And so again, going back to being intentional, right? We need to figure out like, what is my relationship with this person? How much energy do I need to give them? And do I need to give them any energy at all? So I think again, for anyone listening, that's a great thing just to put a pin in, is like, you really do need to tier out people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I would say for someone that you care a lot about with, it's pretty darn important that you communicate. And it's pretty darn important that you practice your people pleasing tendencies with them, because you're going to be in that relationship for the long haul, right? With somebody else, you just might be like, I don't need to practice anything because I'm just cutting you out. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, even with high priority relationships and with people that you find important to you, I think this goes for that, but it also even goes for, let's say, you're putting yourself out to the public and you have all these people coming at you. Tons of people are always going to gaslight you and stonewall you.
Oh,
And this is where you have to really ask yourself and weigh your intentions. Like, how much energy do I want to give this? I've been gaslighted and stonewalled a lot in my life. I am willing to hear people out. I am willing to be fair, hear their side. But when we look at people who are giving evasive replies, they're refusing to really answer the questions. They're trying to, make you question your sense of self and your sanity. It's like,
yeah.
really, how much do you need
Oh,
to give to that?
yeah, also just messy all over the place, fucking psychos that come your way, especially when you do the kind of work that we do. People that have never had anyone listen to them ever. And so they come at you in the DMs with like, and you're just like, whoa, dude, like this is a lot of need for someone that I have no relationship with.
So someone asks what stonewalling is, and it says to delay or block by refusing to answer questions or giving evasive replies. So somebody, someone who gives you the silent treatment on purpose is avoiding answering your questions, being direct with you. People who just are like, no.
Yeah. The other thing I was excited to talk about, if it's cool,
Yeah.
is I love how I'm going to try to put some cohesive language around this, but basically how like it's not on you to create the teaching moment for other people, right? This is something my wife, Allison Rutberg, a great coach, by the way, if you need some coaching support. But like she talks about this all the time where like, again, I've had crazy narcissistic bosses, and it's like after I kind of cut things off with them, it wasn't my job to be like, and this is how you hurt me, and this is like all the fucked up things that you need to do to get better. It's like we don't need to people please to give away our resources, what we get paid to do as professional coaches, to create the learning moment for someone else, right? Like it's our nature, of course, as healers to be like, okay, like, let me help you work on this stuff. But unless you're getting the bag, and again, unless they're in that tier of people that deserves your attention, I think it's so hard for us sometimes to not offer the lesson.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, oh, that's such a good one. As I've grown my following, you know, I'm very aware when people are manipulating to get those teachable moments out of me. And like you're saying, when you're a people pleaser, you want to save the day, you want to teach someone, you're gonna like pour out of your well over and over, and you're going to spend so much time, so having those boundaries are so necessary. Like, I can't tell you how many people every day don't read my bio. It says no DMs. They're still going to DM me. They're going to still email me a question that's required in a session. They're still going to ask those things in the comments. And finding that sense of self-control to leave that shit unread, unanswered, and so many people do this too. Let's not even talk about, we're just talking about people pleasing and commanding your worth. Like, I see this so much with healers in the community where they're scared of their pricing. And by all means, like, when we are really trying to help people, yes, there's a certain level of accessibility that's fair. But at the same time, when you're trying to move around where you feel like you're wanting to go and what your intentions are for you, you can't really take everybody else's intentions for you and make them your standard. Every time I have increased my prices for my sessions over the years that I've started, there's a hesitation. And I mean, tons of people won't talk about this, where they're like, oh, I'm having that fear of missing out. Am I going to get less people? Are people not going to fuck with me? Most of the time, they're just going to go to people who are going to give them the things that they want, who are going to be completely people pleasing to them, and that's why you have to have a strong relationship with yourself. If I'm going to be transparent, even during the pandemic, I saw a bunch of healers saying, oh, it's the pandemic, a lot of people are hurting right now, we're going to go completely sliding scale, or we're going to do this. And I remember sitting with my guys, I was like, what's up, y'all? Is this something I need to do? And they were like, no. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what
Oh,
you mean? They're like, no.
yeah.
And the respect and the obedience to spirit, why that's important, because let's say the 2 weeks I might have went with having minimal bookings, they blessed me tenfold 4 weeks later because of that obedience.
I also love like people pleasing through the lens of business. I think
Yes.
such a dope thing that you hit on. I was talking about this with Allison yesterday, actually, where it's like, I've had a couple dudes, like tire kickers or whatever, and they're just like, hey man, like, not for me, right? Like basically just telling me straight up, like, you're too expensive. And I was like, all right, that's cool, right? Like, all good. Everyone's in a different situation. But, as a clothing head my whole life, right? The shit that I aspire to, when I went into the polo store, Ralph is not apologizing to me. Yo, Els, I'm sorry this sweater costs 4 yards, right? Ralph is saying to me as the customer, yo, I made you this beautiful sweater, and if you want to spend on it, that's cool. And if you don't, that's okay as well, you know? And again, I think so many of us, we try to shrink ourselves down to fit the needs of people that maybe aren't just ready to make the commitment to want to work with us.
Yeah.
You know, I
I,
mean,
so, I
yeah,
love someone just said, as long as the prices aren't greed level. And I think that's a great thing to drop in there. Look, I know that in the times we are living in, I think this is a good topic to bring into this, because I do think that a lot of the self-love movement and the self-esteem movement has created a lot of narcissism,
ooh,
and a
hold on.
lot of
Someone
people.
just said they can't hear. Can we
No?
hear? Can you guys hear? Sorry, two people just said in the chat they couldn't hear.
Oh no. Hello?
Okay, looks like we're okay.
Okay. So I think this is a good topic because recently I've seen this and I do agree with it. So when we're talking about greed level, right? Because yes, there are some people who, out of radical self-esteem and self-worth, they become uncompromising to other people, right? And it is a slippery slope. It is a slippery slope because I've seen people who, where I'm like, yeah, you're being outrageous because you want to project this really high sense of self, but honestly and truly, it's not fair that you charge this because you either don't have the experience, the credentials, the training, or whatever. And that's where I see where narcissism and greed and control can be very manipulative to people to get other people to people please the narcissist, people please the greedy person. So that's where, too, you have to recognize and have intuition and discernment of, is someone else trying to take advantage of you, even in that. I mean, it is no different. Like, we always talk about, you know, when women go to the mechanic, they always say, have a man go with you because you don't want to get taken advantage of. And because women are so sometimes agreeable, they're like, oh, I just want to get it done. So of course, if you tell me it's that, then I'm gonna. When it's like, no, did you just pay 3 times the amount because you got taken advantage of? So discernment, yes, discernment is so necessary. But you know, even when we're talking about business, I know at times it's just going back to like really going in yourself, asking what your intentions are for yourself. Also, too, let's bring in the obedience to spirit, because I think a lot of times people don't bring in their spiritual practice into their decisions. And so they end up having to go down a path that later on they have to course correct because they didn't check in.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, there's times where people are like, Trap Witch, please come to Clubhouse, please come to TikTok, please come to. And I remember, like, let's say, like, feeling so like, oh, I don't want to get on Clubhouse, like, because I just feel like people are just trying to find ways to spread me thin to make myself more accessible to what they want from me. And I remember sitting down with Spirit and like, yo, y'all want me to go to Clubhouse? They was like, nah. I was like, bet, because I didn't want to anyway.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? It's like we keep coming back to this in the conversation today about how, like, you really kind of have to get right with yourself before you move into relation with others. And often those conflicts with others that we've all experienced in the past, right? I see a lot of people in the comments are talking about, like, this was me, like I was like super people pleasing person, right? It's like we have to get real clear and intentional and slow, and like I was saying before, kind of work out things in our own space before we bring it out into the world. You know, I would also like to add to what you were saying about not only we need to get into the kind of spirited place. I feel like something that I've noticed in my own practice is I need to get into the like integrated place, right? Because when my admittedly very needy only child, like inner child, wounded child who like needs validation is entering into those business conversations, I'm not in a good place because I'm like starting to agree to stuff that I don't want to do, right? I'm like saying yes to things that I'm not excited about. And so we kind of need like the whole team to be with us before we can go into those really, really important meaningful conversations, right? And I think that all the little ones along the way, like you were saying, that fall into those different tiers, maybe for everyone watching, that's a good way to practice. You know, there's like an old Jewish joke that's like, if you want to be in a happy marriage, if you want Thai food and your wife wants sushi, don't get Chinese.
I feel like some people didn't get it.
Well, right? It's basically
So
like,
pretty much like just get something else that's not either.
no, it's basically like, don't have a situation in which neither person is happy because you're both trying to people please.
Okay. Okay. Got you. I was like, I don't think I completely got it. You know,
I like it. It's like doing improv. You gotta have a joke that bombs once in a while.
it's okay. It's okay. You know,
My friend once said, by the way, he's like, if you're ever doing stand up and a joke bombs, he goes, just say too smart for the room.
it's like, yeah, like, I mean, you know, and look, like, if we're talking about that, like, let's talk about that when it comes to like creativity. Like, you know, there's that quote that says like, don't dumb it down, make them come up and get it. So, you know, I feel like this goes into like how people also create and how people create content. You know, I remember in the beginning of my journey, people were like, you write too much, or you this, or you that. And I remember if I would have people pleased and went into just doing absolutely everything that they wanted, I wouldn't have things that are in alignment or organic to me, you know. And again, like how people pleasing can just show up in business. It could show up in your creation. Like we see entertainment artists do it all the time where they're like, oh, what's marketable? Like, did you ever watch A Star Is Born?
With Gaga?
Yeah.
Half of it.
Well, I really liked that movie a lot. And so like you saw her be this like really talented songwriter and like this soulful artist. And then like she starts being created into this like corporate puppet. And Bradley Cooper's like, what the fuck are you doing? You look like a clown. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? But again, right? And for the cost of success, people think that they're going to miss out an opportunity. They think they're going to miss the bag. They think that they're going to just miss out. And so they're willing to compromise and completely change themselves in order to be something that's mass consumable.
Mm. It's also like the way in which we try to model ourselves into who we want people to be, or no, who we think people want us to be, which I think does everyone like a disservice. Speaking of the Gaga example, right? It's like if she had stayed lame, stayed corporate, then like never would have blossomed into like the person that inspires so many by being a real freak-a-leak.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think that the space that we're moving into right now in the future has a lot more humanity. And you're seeing a lot of people right now being really brave. I feel like I especially see it in like entertainment. A lot of people are being very brave about being transparent and vulnerable and bringing back the humanity to the arts, because people are having breakdowns and people are succumbing and to, you know, mental illness and all emotional you know, dysregulation. And a lot of it's because of extreme pressure, people pleasing, and trying to be what people want them to be. And so, you know, even the other day, I thought it was really an interesting observation. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but like Summer Walker the other day, she was performing and she couldn't perform a few of her new songs off her new album. She's like, I'm sorry guys, like I'm just not going to perform these songs. Like the wounds still feel too fresh like when I perform them. And so like people then started comparing her to like Beyonce. They were like, Beyonce was getting cheated on. She showed up on stage and she was able to do this. And if you just don't want to perform and you want to keep letting us down and then stop performing. So the conversation became that people said, oh, is she a better artist and not a performer? But here's the thing, you know, instead of trying to rip away performance from her, what about having the conversation where in that moment she made a decision to share something that was really vulnerable and intimate, that could be a conversation, and instead people are tearing her down for what they want,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was a good show.
Just like we were talking about before, right? You become the villain real quick when you start putting up those boundaries, right? Because then all the people that like, I get the metaphor, it's like they suck off you.
Yeah.
They get really mad when their supply gets cut off.
Mm-hmm.
I had something that came through that I wanted to talk about. Just it kind of piggybacks on the business conversation, but I thought this was really real, which is like, I think a lot of people pleasers are kind of like afraid to win, and they carry this like real resentment towards the world because they're so ashamed of admitting like what they want and what they're willing to do to get it. You know, it's like, because again, like if we think that competition is bad, or that being, being like a big like quarterback on the field is like the wrong way, I think so many of us get into these situations where we're so afraid to win because we don't want people to be upset by our desire for victory.
It's 111 as you say that, so this is a very good topic. I would say I have to agree with you. I recently wrote a post about being an opportunist.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because human design, for those of you who are familiar with it and those of you who may not be familiar about it, human design really changed my perspective on being opportunistic, because for some people it's in their design that they have to be an opportunist, because a lot of their destiny, a lot of their mission is coming through their network and who they know and how people position them based on what they bring to the table. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think a lot of times, right, like when you have that in your design, you have to become a person who's like really good at people and really good at negotiating and really showing people who you are and what you're about. And then sometimes if you get familiar with these designs, in some of these write-ups, it says you don't go above and beyond to prove your worth to people who just don't see it. You just continue to network and to put yourself in places where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. And so, recently a friend of mine, because like what you're saying really resonates for me. Like when I got into this world of, spiritual community, I was really big on collaboration. I'm really big on collaboration, sharing space, co-creating. Although I'm very independent, know what I want, know how I like to do it, there's still an element of knowing that other people bring things to the table and then we could create new things.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine said, she admitted this in our workshop. She's like, I used to think you were very opportunistic, but I realized that's not a bad thing, because she said, you being opportunistic and your determination to win holds a door open for me. I wouldn't be in this space right now had you not become more opportunistic, because then you're allowing people to come behind you. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that ultimately being competitive is good, to always want to ascend for yourself first, like, every day showing up to be a better version of you. But, also too, just like you said, like I think for women too, and I talked about this maybe like 3 years ago, I remember saying that I feel women don't get to outrightly admit that they have a large sexual appetite. And I say that not in regards to just sex, but I say that in regards to achievement. Like men, it's a very patriarchal thing to be like competitive and go up the ladder and like, yeah, I want to wake up and I want to be successful and I want to eat victory for breakfast. Like when you hear women say that as much, it's a little bit more taboo. And so
Mm-hmm.
I asked a friend, I said, do you think that men have more leeway to have this larger sexual appetite and, this desire for success? She said, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. For a lot of women, it's like, oh, you're doing too much. And I think that's why a lot of women shrink themselves, especially even if they're multifaceted. Recently, there was a woman who went viral because she hired an overnight doula for her child, her newborn child, her second child. She paid $6,000 to have this overnight doula to help her. And like all these other women were shaming her because they're like, oh, how dare you, not stay up with the baby and not do this. It's like, but we don't know what other things this woman has going on in her life, what she's trying to get to. She might have a multi-million-dollar business that she's trying to run while also becoming a mom. And so there's almost this sense of having to pick and choose where you win. It's like, oh, you're a mom now, just go win at that. But no, let's not be the woman who wants to win at being a mom, win at being a businesswoman, win at being why can't we have that all? Why can't we have the whole buffet?
Well, it's again, right? It's like people want to put you in a box, right? And they want to discount your experiences to fit in with like what they think is the right thing. That's why all of us in this space, everyone that's here today, this collective brain trust and spirit trust, right? I think that's why we're trying to just get very clear, very intentional, very discerning, because when you were telling that story, I was like, this goes back to tearing people out, right? Mm-hmm. You got a business, you gave birth, you're living your life, and like some fucking Yahoo on the internet that you've never met is like has an opinion about anything. I mean, we have to really, I think, like normalize not giving a fuck about just right. It's like.
And that's where so much social anxiety comes up for people who are so terrified to go after their dreams. They are, so many people are like, oh my God, I got my first bad comment on YouTube. I got my first bad comment on Instagram. And it is true. So many people internalize the few bad things people say versus the good things that people say. People, I'm sorry, they chicken out. And they go sit down because someone told them to go sit down. I can't tell you how many people said that I don't write good. I don't talk good. They don't like how I look. They don't like the things that like. I have like probably a great large complaint box. I have gossip columns that are written about me, but I'm not going to sit down because I'm not going to allow myself to be people pleased out of my destiny. Mm-hmm. And I think that why people have to understand, there's a quote that I made a few weeks ago, about a month ago. It says, this is why you have to have really deep conversations with God and yourself constantly, because people are always going to be used as a weapon to chicken shit you out of your destiny and your purpose and your power. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Always. That people like, and I tell people all the time, like, although Christ is not like my main, guide that I go to, he's still somebody I fuck with. I like the story of Christ. Like, I think he's cool. And, it's like, you have to be really willing to ride or die for your cause. And like, I'm sure that a lot of people were like, what are you doing? I don't know what you're doing. I don't like what you're doing. He's like, I'm still doing it anyway. Okay, you don't want to hear me today? Okay, cool. I'm gonna keep it moving. And he was really willing to ride for that mission. And again, like, so many people are afraid of the persecution and the crucifixion and the adversity that they get. And again, going back to the conflict thing, going back to being afraid of conflict, having social anxiety around people. And, at first I was not going to watch the Kanye documentary because I've been a little irritated with how he's dealing with his divorce. But I got into it. And again, although I pray for his mental health and how he's dealing with his divorce, like, just watching that documentary was like, damn, this man really believes in himself and his talent. And he was really not willing to people please. Like,
yeah. Oh my God.
Like, even just the you've watched it?
I've watched parts 1 and 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the part 2 where he was signed, with Rockefeller, and like Jay gave him like some daps and put him on the record. He's feeling himself, but then Dame is like not giving him time, not giving him energy, not putting him out there, tell him to sit down, and he's like, you know what? I'm about to fund this shit myself. Just his determination is admirable.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because I've actually been watching people that are on the opposite side of people pleasing to like just be around that energy. And I watched the Kanye doc, and that scene where he's in Def Jam with he's basically rapping All Falls Down, and like no one gives a fuck. Like the lady's on the phone, not listening. He's like trying to get the intern to pay. Like no one cares. And it's so dope that it's like, this guy got like the thing that we're all like so afraid of is like putting yourself out there and having no one give a fuck, of something that I'm very familiar with, frankly. But it's like, it's so empowering because when you've been through that, you could like, you really can face anything. I was also watching Dame Dash, right? I was watching an interview with him a couple days ago, and like, you know, whatever, we could all have our opinions about Dame Dash, but like, there is something about just like his belief that whatever he's doing is the hottest, baddest shit is like, I think all of us could borrow a little bit from that. You know what I mean? Sometimes, that's the other thing. Sometimes as people pleasers, we might need to borrow a little bit from the people that we allegedly kind of don't like, right?
I said that, I literally said this, you know, someone just said, and I think it's so true. Someone says Kanye is a walking contrast, so great and so terrible at the same time, which I think is why he like truly embodies like that Gemini struggle. Yeah, you know, the duality and fighting with the two sides. Yep. And, you know, I talked about him. I actually went to his listening party in July here in Atlanta, and I left feeling really inspired. I mean, he was like 2 hours late. Everybody was waiting. It was a jam-packed stadium during the height of the pandemic. There was about 70,000 people there. And he literally came out and he did not say a word the whole time. And I thought it was so powerful because he's someone who's been really scrutinized for him having a voice, because yes, sometimes he doesn't know how to say certain things, but then sometimes he has some really powerful shit to say. And I was just so amazed at how he commanded so much presence without saying a word. And then, you know, he dispersed us. And as soon as everybody was dispersing, the speakers came back on, everyone just came flooding and running back like, and he was gone. He didn't come back out. And I just thought it was such a lesson in commanding energy and not giving a fuck. And I felt this strong undertow. It's like, you're going to say shit when I say shit anyway. And guess what? I'm not going to say shit tonight. You're still going to say. It was just, it felt like it was a very high vibration in there. It didn't feel low vibe. It definitely felt like a ritual that we were in. Yeah. And so I think he's a very interesting character. And just like you said, even people we don't like are a mirror and we can learn certain things from them. And one of the things, you know, that people did say about him in the documentary is like, the dude's got fucking heart. And I will tell people this all the time. I think that heart carries you a lot farther than intelligence. Mm-hmm. And also talent. You know, a lot of people don't like Cardi B. I actually love her. She's another person where it's just like heart carried her a long way. Heart and confidence. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how talented you are, because you can get people pleased out of your talents, out of your dreams, out of your determination, if you ain't got the fucking heart. Yeah. If you ain't got the heart.
Well, again, right? It's like why all this goes back to, we got to tune into ourselves, right? You got to get your own energy popping, right? Like, I think, again, that's why people love these like celebrities or whatever. Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, I think, once said that like watching music is like paying someone else to like believe in themselves so that you think you can do it too, right? And I think that a lot of us, again, you know, we're navigating this new terrain in which we have so much access to so many people all the time that like we kind of can lose our heart because there's just so many like things that are pulling us out of ourselves, right? There's so much communication, there's so much distraction. And maybe as a first step to working on that people pleasing is like, you kind of just need to zone in on like, whatever happens, I'm gonna be okay, right? Which is faith and self-belief.
Mm-hmm. You know, I like what you said about, you know, with there's so much accessibility and people being greatly distracted, they, it's information overload. I think that's why, constantly I tell people you have to really, like you said, tune into yourself and have discernment, because, I feel like um, the internet has made it a really um, interesting, beautiful place where we can sample so many things. But also, when we start sampling too much and then we allow something that's not organic to our journey to become us, that's where we become, like, it's like invasion of the body snatchers, where you're walking around as someone else and you're like, well, how did I get here? Why are things really working or aren't working? Or you're just completely unhappy.
Yeah, it's that power vacuum we were talking about earlier, right? It's like when you don't know kind of on a general level, on a soul level, where you're going, what you're looking to do, what you're trying to be intentional about, what you like, what you don't like. Other people with way stronger agendas who don't give a fuck are just going to come in and steamroll you. You know, I was talking with somebody who said, I'm thinking about taking this job with this guy, but this dude who would be my boss has like called me up 4 times out of nowhere. And I was like, man, that might be a behavior you need to watch, because if this person's like not caring at all if you're available, if you have time, if it's even appropriate for them to interact like that, like now you have an opportunity, like you were saying, other people are gonna be like the teachers basically, or what, like other people are gonna throw shit at you to see like how far you could come. I was like, you might need to tell this dude like, hey man, if you want to talk, like shoot me a text and we'll find a time to talk. But like you can't pick up the phone like I'm your personal Batman.
That is such a good terminology.
Person.
I think that I just pulled something here, and I was like, Spirit, you got anything to add to this conversation? It's interesting. So, with people pleasing, we have to watch codependency.
Oh yes.
You know, our addictions. Because I think too, again, and we're repeating ourselves, but I think it's good to refresh people. Like, even again, like we said, are you addicted to being the nice guy? Are you addicted to being the good guy? Are you addicted to people's perception of you? Are
Yeah.
you addicted to weighing your self-esteem against them?
Yeah.
And what are your boundaries like? Like,
Yeah.
boundaries are so necessary, and I think that people don't realize there's a whole bunch of different type of boundaries. There's even financial boundaries, there's emotional boundaries, there's like physical, there's tons of types of boundaries. So I encourage people to immerse themselves in looking at the vastness of what boundaries um contain, because there's all types. And then also too, learning to identify with the clair called clairsentience, noticing your reoccurring physical symptoms, your emotional symptoms, like people in human design too who are often sacral ruled, right? Getting in touch with your sacral chakra. But it's like, is it saying mm-hmm? Is it saying mm-mm? Intuitive people, intuition is it's harder to tap into sometimes, because it can come as a quiet whisper, and if you're not paying attention or you're tuning it out, you're gonna miss it. There's so many types of ways to pick up on things, but the more you stuff down your feelings, the signs, the signals that you're getting, the red flags sometimes, and you continue to walk past them, that's where it becomes dangerous, because a lot of times then you can end up really disassociating.
Yeah. Or you bug out and you just get into pop off land because after months and months and months of, oh, I'm gonna keep it cool. I'm gonna be the nice person.
Mm-hmm.
One day it's just too much, and you get into some psycho shit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like you said before, I think we're living in a time where just people are so accessible. Like, even recently I've been playing around with putting my phone on do not disturb, and even the fact that now Apple has it where it tells the other person that you have your notification silenced. It's almost like it's like a blessing and a curse, because it's still giving people so much access.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? It's becoming so invasive. And so I think we just have to be mindful, because again, at the end of the day, people aren't going to be aware unless we communicate, and we really communicate effectively.
Mm-hmm. You into sports at all? A little bit? All right, right. But like something that came from me this week as like an intuitive hit was, you got to be the coach that knows how to control the flow of the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if the other team is just dunking on you left and right, you need to find a way to slow things down so that your players and everybody can get in a better position. And I think that the reason I'm saying this now is to piggyback on what you were saying about accessibility and notifications is like sometimes the information is just too fast and you
Yeah.
can't play the game well at that speed, right? So part of this, I think, again, as we get into this, as we're landing the plane, so to speak, of the session, it's like, how can you slow the game down in your favor, right? How can you set things up to your advantage? And I think with people pleasing, sometimes that could just be like, I'm gonna get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's so hard for people pleasers, isn't it? Like to tell someone, like to not take something on immediately and be like, yo, let me get back to you, right? For all of us that make plans when we don't want to. Right? You say yes when you just want to sit home in your undies and eat ice cream, right? And it's like, let me get back to you. You just got to slow the pace of the game so that you could, recalibrate, set your players up on the field in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's funny because even when I went to Italy last month, I was so intrigued how, like, I remember I was like, oh, I kind of want to do brunch today. Let me see if, like, is there brunch? My question was like, is there brunch in Italy? And I started looking at like all the times that things opened, and it was like almost impossible to get brunch because most of the restaurants were like not opening until noon. And even if you've watched like Emily in Paris on Netflix, like it's a very European thing where they kind of like flow and make their own time, and they do their own thing.
Yep.
And we always say this a lot, like there's lots of memes about this where like American and over here in the West, like there's this constant, like there's this joke where you could like be on your deathbed and you have like an email coming through and it's like, hey, excuse me, I'm on my deathbed right now, it's kind of inconvenient, but I'm just, like, even just feeling like the necessity to constantly be in that survival and responding and being accessible. And I think, we've made it again though, like I think it's beautiful with how social media has exploded in the past few years. And because some of us had make a living on being accessible and having, it's like constant voyeurism and looking at being allowed people to look in and to observe or whatever. It almost feels then like, oh my God, like if I take that away or if I don't do that, like what am I doing? And so we have to watch that because it becomes a slippery slope. Like we're just giving people so much in order to have them consume us.
Yeah. And like, in business, you fire clients, right? In relationships, you break up with people. I think that we're sort of figuring out in this new internet era that's never existed before, what's like our version of that, right? Maybe blocking, but like, yeah, I love what you're talking about because it's like protecting your energy, wanting to be, right? It's the same thing with all this people pleasing stuff is like, you want to be generous. I think people that are tuned in here, we want to be giving, right? We want to be generous. We want to be in our love. We want to be in a expansive place, but it's also just about being attuned to when something might not be a fit and being able to create some distance between yourself,
Yeah.
like I always notice when I take on a client or not, it's like you kind of have to hear, right? You probably do this too. You hear in between what they're saying and not saying just to get a sense of like where the energy is. You know what I mean? Or it's like when you start dating someone, I haven't done this in a while, but when you did and you had someone that would just be like brutal about talking about their exes, you're like, Ooh, I don't know, man. Like if you have that much static with these people and you're telling me about this on like a second date, like I don't know, dude.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, and again, it's just like about being awake. I think also something that just came through intuitively is like, you know, let your desire to be powerful eclipse your fear of abandonment.
You
Ooh.
know, I think the two things I want to leave people with is um, when we are people pleasers, quiet time and disconnecting
Ooh.
can seem and slowing down can seem really terrifying.
Yep.
And there is a need to disconnect. There is a need to take quiet time alone to rest, to clear your auric field of people and communication. And it could be hard because I remember, like, I think 2018, 2019, I found myself getting really frustrated because I could even feel like in the astral realm, people were pulling me. Like I had a period of time like where 10 people were like, you were in my dream last night. I was like, no, you're just attached and I'm showing up. And I'd be like, I don't get paid for this, so let me sleep.
Yeah.
So, like, so learning to be patient with yourself, disconnect, meditate, take the quiet time, contemplation. And especially, I think, with a lot of us who are walking a path to our manifestations, to our dreams, like, man, Rome wasn't fucking built in a day. Like, it wasn't. Many things aren't just built in a day. And so taking the time to slow down and be patient and listen to your heart and listen to your feelings and your body about things, because a lot of times when you're a people pleaser, it's so scary to turn your phone on do not disturb, to answer those emails a day later instead of right now when you're stretched thin. Like, it's scary, but it's necessary. There's a balance that has to happen between, okay, I'm staying in my time management and my discipline, but at what point are you just not allowing yourself to slow down, be patient with yourself, and to disconnect
Mm-hmm.
and to get your thoughts together?
Yep. Yep. Because when you have that, it's so much harder to stand for the shit that people want when you're a people pleaser. You know what I mean? When you're clear on, like, again, going back to pricing, because it seems like there's a lot of traction in the comments with that, right? Hey, this is what it takes to work with me, right? If not, you can read my writings for free. You could check out my cool lives with the Trap Witch. You could read a book that I recommended, right? But like, that's it. I was thinking about this, right? It's like when you get out of your people pleasing shit, there's so many hands that are outstretched, and like you need to use your discernment to see which ones are pulling you up and which ones are pulling you down.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a quote that says, whoever gives you the most peace should get the most of your time.
Oh,
And
I
I
like.
think, and then I think, like when you take that quiet time alone, you disconnect from certain energies and you really ask yourself, how do I feel without having that in my space? And if the answer is like, man, I feel fucking good, because I know there's times where I've like, been fighting to mend relationships or hold on to them, and they really disturb my peace and cause me a lot of internal chaos and make me really passive aggressive and angry. And then I finally get rid of them. I'm like, oh, like I feel so much better not having to answer a text or a call from them. And that's really telling a lot of times.
Yeah, it's also like, as you were sharing that, it's like fake peace. Like a lot of us will settle for fake peace that
Big
comes
peace.
along with people pleasing, right? We could do a whole, I feel like that could be 2 hours right there, right? Fake peace.
Fake peace. Fake peace. Yes.
Dude,
Like so many people are trying to keep the peace by faking what peace really is. And a lot of times if you have to, like, again, you have to stifle your voice, you can't share your real feelings just to not rock the boat. Is it really something you should be fighting to hold on to in order to just keep it at a minimum while you're suffering in silence? Not really.
yeah, that's it, man,
You have
right?
to
Of
pick. You have to pick and choose. I know some people with their family members and really
course.
high priority relationships. It's different, but you still have to find a way to negotiate and really put boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're talking about today is like kind of a combination of like intuition and strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feel the vibes, check in with yourself, see what the energy is, and then be strategic. Like, what do I owe this person? And like, how important is it that I compromise with them? Right? If it's someone that you're in a partnership with, romantic, professional, there's probably a lot riding on your abilities to compromise, right? Joe Jerkoff that misinterpreted what you said 6 years ago on Instagram, or that whatever, like, has their little comments, not too much, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
that feels
Absolutely.
good. That feels like, that's crispy.
Yes. So I'm so grateful for those of you who came in, and I'm going to post the replay to my page. And
Thank
we've
you.
got another one coming up soon called No More Fake Ass Healing.
Oh yeah, this will be a good one. Thank you for the combo today. I feel, as always, very spicy. We got the spirit of the wild on our team. Also, I just wanted to shout out my ancestor, my grandma Moosey. Used to wear leopard print and African print all the time, so I always think of her. Very fiery woman. Lived to be 106.
Wow.
I know, deep, right?
Yeah, my great grandma Lucy lived to be 105, I think.
Yeah. Whew.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love the coordination. Let's see if we get another coordination by accident again.
Sure, yeah, I love it. Cool. So yeah, I just wanted to say, most of you guys probably know T, but my name is Eliott Aronow. That's my state name. And my coaching website is the same as my Instagram handle, coachingwithels.com. I offer one-on-ones. I offer coaching programs. And I'm actually, this could be cool for anyone listening, I'm actually putting together a creative coaching group that would meet twice a month. Only going to be 6 people. So if any of you identify as artists, painters, musicians, creatives, could be a really cool opportunity to sort of do what T and I are doing here, which is marrying like the world of freshness and flyness with the world of healing and work. So that's it. Whoa, people pleasing. Here we go. What a topic.
It was great. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you all in the chat for staying with us and vibing. I see a lot of what's the word? Gosh, I'm fried after so much energy. What's the word when people comment on your shit? Engagement.
Engagement and resonance.
Yeah, resonance. So, all right, guys, we'll see you soon.
Take care. Thanks, guys. Happy Friday. Happy Venus Day.
Yeah, awesome, T. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for watching. See you soon.
See you guys soon. Bye.
Peace out, swag lords.